When researchers from Cornell asked thousands of people at the end of their lives what their biggest regret was, the answers were about money. An overwhelming 76% of participants said, not living my ideal life. Wow, what a statement. We have author Joe Huff with us today, helping us to understand why life experiences are more valuable than the accumulation of money. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness. Welcome back to the show. Hey, thank you all for who are listening and making this show possible. We are in season 9. I can't believe we're in season 9, John.
I know.
And we're excited to get into the mind of our guest today, Joe Huff. You might have recognized him on Today's Show or Good Morning America, or from his features in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. He is the co-author of the book, The Experiential Billionaire. Should we hold that up? Get that up there, John. There we go.
Oh man, I don't have it.
I got the book. I always got this stuff. I'm the weatherman. Okay, there
you
it is.
You got to forgive me, Joe. I'm in between homes. So
there it is.
All my stuff's in storage.
So he is a co-author of The Experiential Billionaire: Build a Rich Life in Experiences and Die with No Regrets. Joe has traveled the globe, visiting over 50 plus countries. All 50 United States, and absorbing all sorts of life lessons along the way. We have so much to unpack here. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. John, hey, it's great to be back. I can't believe that we're in season 9 recording. It's 182nd. I thought it was 183. 182nd full episode. We will bust 200 by the end of the season. This actually
Thanks,
week,
Joe.
we're probably going to get over 200,000 downloads, which is great. All right. Hey, John, take it away, my man.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you, Joe. It's going to be a great conversation. This is something that Will and I hold near and dear to our hearts. We've never expressed it in these terms, and we're looking forward to making some of our listeners, some of our audience, some of our community experiential billionaires themselves.
Right.
That said, just a couple of announcements, and then we'll jump in. Hey, if you're wanting to find out what MTM is up to, what myself and Will are up to as a team here at MTM, you can find out everything MTM related by simply texting the letters MTM to the telephone number 33777. So that's MTM to 33777. Or you can visit our website, mentalkingmindfulness.com, fairly easy to remember there. And we have 2 live virtual 9-week meditation courses coming up this fall. One on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern, beginning September 10th, and a second course on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern, and that one begins October 6th. And again, you can find more about that by texting MTM to 33777 or visiting our website, mentalkingmindfulness.com. Now, that all said, Joe, we like to kick off the show with a little grounding practice just to get ourselves grounded, but also for our audience. So it's really short, just 1 breath grounding practice. So go ahead, find your feet, find your body, find your seat, whatever that looks like. And let's begin by exhaling and holding empty for a second. A nice deep breath in, into your belly first, then into your chest. Holding full at the top, noticing that fullness, and now letting go. Letting go nice and slowly, nice and controlled, easy, easy, easy. And as you wrap up that exhalation, just begin to breathe naturally. Start to bring some movement into your body, wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes, and noticing that we are in the here and now. Experience this here and now, right? So again, Joe, very excited to get into this with you, and we're going to jump right into this. So we're having experiences all the time, right? In every single moment that we're living. That's what mindfulness is being tuned into that present experience. Well, in your book, what is the context of how you describe experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll start by saying that although my introduction alludes to all of these, crazy world adventures, travel, etc., it's not necessarily about travel specifically or adventure specifically. It's not even really about experiences necessarily versus things. It's about making sure that we're finding and identifying the things that matter to us and taking action to do those things, right? And those things can be small, they can be everyday things. The definition of an experience doesn't have to be climbing Mount Everest for it to be memorable or valuable. It really just means that it's something that you value and that you'll value even more probably in the future. And those are the types of things that we can build more and more of those types of things throughout our life if we actually take time and identify those types of things.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And so take us through some of the experiences that you've had. Bridget couldn't be here today. She's the other co-author of this book, Bridget Hilton. But what are some of those crazy experiences there's some really, honestly, I only got the chance to read halfway through the book, but I did enjoy how far I got, and hearing about some of the experiences that you had, some of the storytelling going on in this book. So, maybe take us through a couple of those and what those experiences have done for you.
Sure. And I think that this is something that, we all kind of find personally, but it's also borne out in data, is that a lot of the times the things that mean the most to us are things that involve giving. In my case in particular, I came from a check-to-check family growing up. I wound up going on a very different trajectory due to a near-death experience that my father had when he was only 48 years old. And that allowed me to try a bunch of different things, eventually leading me to start a company, and then allowing me to actually start working with philanthropies, which was just beyond my wildest dreams when I was a kid. I thought philanthropies, first of all, were some walled garden full of tuxedos and $1,000 plates, and something I wasn't part of that club. But so to give you an idea though of some of the most memorable experiences, my business partner and I, Bridget, started a company to help give hearing aids to people in need through the sales of our audio products that we created. And happy to share that story in more detail. But the actual point of the story that I'm going to share right now is we had this dream of actually helping somebody hear, helping somebody get that gift of hearing for the first time. And after only 8 months after we started this company, we found ourselves actually on the ground at this hearing mission in Peru, helping this 18-year-old girl named Maria put hearing aids into her ears to see if she could hear. She had never heard before. Mm-hmm. And that experience was so profound because we put those hearing aids in her ears and her eyes lit up. Her parents started crying. We started crying. I was laughing, thinking, oh my God, I'm crying. And Maria's hearing for the first time and she's hearing me cry. So this is not the best thing to hear. But it was just this incredibly powerful moment of watching, someone's life change. And, that's the kind of thing that I think, we look for purpose in our lives, but we don't actually realize that when we have those little bits of, purpose that we see, that we touch, the effect we have on others, those are things that we carry with us as really, really valuable memories, really, really valuable proof points as to our life being a life that meant something. So right. For me, that's definitely one of my top experiences, is actually being able to do that. And we actually didn't stop there. We were actually able to continue and travel and give over 50,000 people hearing aids around the world. Incredible. In over 40 countries. So it was a crazy experience. But I can share some other things as well about, a lot of fun stuff along the way. I think that it's important to step out of your comfort zone to
completely.
Find experiences. Yeah, I think actually I like to say that I don't want to take credit for this. I'm sure I heard it or read it from someone else that was more philosophical or just smarter in general. But I actually, when you see things that scare you, that's probably the direction to really look. That's a good indicator that there's something behind that is probably really valuable. Sure. So some of the stuff along the way that we did, we went and did some guerrilla trekking, and it took us 6 months to plan, and it was a pretty intense experience, but we literally were in the volcanic national forest in Rwanda guerrilla trekking with these beautiful majestic creatures that I can't even explain that experience, and some of the other things along the way that we got to do, the travel related stuff is always just so remarkable because you get to see so much. you get to learn so much about cultures. So there's a story that I love to share, which was we were in the Masai Mara with the Masai tribe, and we were speaking to this tribal elder, and he basically was telling me that they just eat really milk and cow meat, basically beef and blood, basically everything
Oh,
from the
wow.
cow, the primary source of their diet. And I remember just thinking, that's so different. And then as we started talking about other things, there was so much we had in common that it was just so remarkable to be like
Wow.
somewhere so far away and start off on something that's like, wow, that's a really different, starting point. And then to come to find that, they love the same types of things like music and dance and all kinds of fun, life quality things. So people are really the same. So just kind of every experience getting exposed and then learning that we're really a lot more similar than we realize.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Will and I talk about compassion, developing compassion, and Will's been through the compassion course at Stanford with Dr. Jim Doty's course that he developed there at the Center for Compassion and Altruistic Research and Education, which that's a mouthful. But in that compassion, there's a piece, that common humanity. And when you can see that common humanity across your coworkers, your family, and then broadening it out to other cultures, other countries, other ethnicities, we have way more in common than we have different. So I love that you shared that. Will, I'm sorry I stepped on you. I know you were going to say something.
No, not at all. I mean, I really love how you brought in the philanthropic piece to this, and so it's like you could read this book or just hear the title of this book and just think like, oh, well, I'm going to go on a great vacation. I'm going to have great experiences. But when you tie those experiences into giving experience to other people or helping other people, it just, not only are you just having a great experience in a different time, in a different culture, in a different way, and all the things that come along with just like being in a different place, but then to help other human beings. It lights up another part of our biology. That just, it really, I mean, come back to what John's talking about, the common humanity. It really makes us realize like how incredibly similar we are. We just happen to be, in different places and, have different life experiences that brought us to, where we are in that particular moment. And some of it, a lot of people, you're in LA, I'm in New York, John's in Colorado. I mean, we're very fortunate for the lives that we have. And I think one thing that's really helped me, and I've done a bunch of traveling myself, and I've been to I understood a big wake up call for me was when I went to Tanzania back in 2010 and then back again in 2012. And I sponsored a kid, put him through college, and went to visit his parents and him in his little town outside of Marangu is called, the baseline of Kilimanjaro. And, you hear the term dirt poor. And then I went to visit this young man who just graduated from college, and I went to his graduation and stuff, and it was a really great experience. But I went to his actual village, and here he's in, his family is living in this one room shack. It has a tin roof, and they have the walls are made of wood and mud, and they're living on the dirt poor, like no floor, no cement, no flooring at all. And I was like, wow. I'm like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. No bathroom. They just point over to a hole in the ground where some corn stalks are. I was like, wow, like this is, the next level of poor. And I came back to the States and I'm like, what do I have to complain about? Like I have running water, there's we have lights, all 24 hours a day. And, so just giving ourselves the opportunity to have experiences like that, has really helped me to be more appreciative of the life that I have and things that we have. And it's, when I want to complain, and of course I still complain, but I complain a lot less, and just also just realizing from these experiences, like what the hell am I complaining about? So I'm with you, Joe. Beautiful.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that story, and thank you for doing that. That's a very noble gesture and noble thing to do. And I'm sure the the saying of, you get more out of those things than the people you help. I'm sure you probably feel that just is true.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's so contagious. Giving
Yeah.
is contagious, and it's okay to, you can go stay in the resort and have a Mai Tai in the hot tub if you want to do those things. But there's still, you can do those things and do things that are, helping people around you. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, where you're starting at, how much disposable income. You don't even have to have money. Like those people that you helped, for instance, they can help other people around them. Maybe it's with emotional support or some type of, other type of assistance that doesn't require like giving, cash or something else. And people around the world do that regularly. And I think the real big takeaway from your story, and from, I guess, what I'm trying to say also, is that perspective, that, seeing how other people around the world everywhere live and act. And it really gives you that feeling of gratitude that we're all, that gives us that happiness inside. Once you have that perspective, you can shift that thought from what you don't have or what's going wrong to instead what you do have and what's going right, and having that thankful kind of mindset. And for me, that's been just incredibly powerful to be able to stop as things have gone, because the wheels come off. Life's hard. People, I'm sure you guys have been through all kinds of crazy, terrible things, and, life goes on, and it's how we deal with them. Right. And one of my most invaluable experiences actually was when my father passed away. And I was in this moment of just like being just absolutely devastated. I was I was so upset that he had to suffer. He passed from cancer. He had a really rough go, but he had been fortunate to get a heart transplant a decade before. So as it was all going on, I actually was fortunate to be reading, coincidentally, this book about the history of Buddhism, and there was all these amazing parallels and allegories in this book that just kept reminding me that there's so much to be thankful for. So instead of thinking about woe is me and poor my dad, I thought how lucky I was. I have a dad. I know my dad, how lucky he was for all the things he had, how lucky, I just started reframing everything. And it just gave me this incredible, burst of life and this urgency again to to go after things that I think mattered and identify the things that I think, I could do that would create value for me and for the world at large. And again, not all those things are going to be monetary for sure. Obviously, a lot of, and money, I guess the underlying story for the book is money comes and goes. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire, you could lose all your money. You can, anything can happen. But your experiences, you never lose those. Like whatever you invested your time, which is your most valuable resource, whatever you did with that time, that is your treasure. That's literally the treasure of your life. So it's so important to not waste your time.
Right. And, coming back to your story and Will's story, the power to expand your worldview, right? We've talked about the common humanity, but also just expanding your worldview and understanding where people are coming from. I think that can be really helpful. I went and did a medical mission to Nepal. We were in Kathmandu, and then we went up into the mountains and worked with people in various villages there. And then from there, we had to fly through Dubai. And we're like, well, while we're flying through Dubai, we'll spend some time here. And the two opposite ends of the spectrum there, the extreme poor living in the mountains of Nepal that know nothing else outside of their immediate village. And then the extreme height of opulence in Dubai, where even like the police cars are Ferraris and Lamborghinis. They're different ends of the spectrum, but neither one of them is necessarily wrong, right? I mean, yeah, we don't want to get wrapped up in money and objects necessarily, but it was interesting to see the two different sides of the spectrum and start to appreciate that and appreciate the worldview, right? Understanding why people are the way they are, where they're coming from, and because where they're coming from, their ideals, values, thoughts, emotions are going to be different. So if you could talk for a second about what I spoke about there with how these experiences help you to expand your worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that to, hammer home that point, money isn't the enemy, but it's not, it's the means, not the end, right? So you can do a lot of great things with money. You can even obviously have and facilitate way more experiences if you have obviously a lot of money. But
Right.
money itself, the accumulation of wealth, the accumulation of things doesn't equal happiness. And we see this
Right.
all the time globally. There's lots of miserable people that have a lot of money. And I think that, really getting that perspective, I think to your point, like Nepal's a great example. Like it's still every year the happiest place on earth. People there seem to have this happiness, level of measurement, because that's not how they're measuring their quality of life. It's not about how much money is in the bank. It's about, do they have a fulfilling life? Do they have meaningful relationships? Do they feel that they have purpose? Those are the things that people all at the end of their life, really move up to the top of the list of the things that matter most. And we did a study of over 20,000 people.
Yeah.
In the research for the book, asking like, what's the most valuable thing in your life? And nobody put things. Nobody put, my watch, my car, or whatever. Everybody put an experience. And the remarkable thing about that data is, and again, this was global. That's why I think this hopefully helps answer this question, is the remarkable thing is that the answers weren't, stay in overwater bungalows or go on safari. They were things that you could do, things that were attainable because it had personal meaning. A lot of the things were like, I always wanted to learn a foreign language so I could speak more to my grandparents, or I wanted to visit the state 2 states over where, my family's from and I've never been, or little things like things that if you just put some time and planning in, you could actually do that. And I think that, that stuff snowballs because those are all those little things that we just assume, well, we'll have more time. We'll have more time later. We can do that someday. We'll just do it someday, not now. It's not planned. And, this is something in the book that we really, we try to, the book really was designed as a toolkit to give people, the actionables that they can do to take that urgency, find the things they want to do and actually do them. Because our personal goals they don't come with any accountability. They don't come with deadlines. So if you've got work, if you've got bills to pay, if you've got normal societal, requirements that we all have, it's easy to let those take priority. But unfortunately, as we start to hit the twilight era of our life, we start to realize that those things didn't matter. We spent so much time. Of course, paying the bills matters, right? But above and beyond that, well, there's a lot of time that we still waste, right?
Sure.
So, and everybody says, well, I don't have time, but I guarantee if you really stop and look at how you spend all of your time, there's a lot of opportunity to change things around. It's not, and again, it's okay to watch Netflix, but maybe don't binge watch or scroll for 4 hours and let it just suck your time, because we live in a world where everything is so painstakingly designed to steal our time from us. So we need to get our time back to start investing back in the things that actually mean something to us.
Yeah, I've just recently deleted all my social media, at least the apps. I still have the accounts except for Instagram. I completely deleted it. And Will's laughing because I've done this before.
My wife does it all the time.
I have a friend that does the same thing.
Oh my gosh, it sucks so much time. So I'm really trying to be more intentional about my use of time. And Will, you've got me reading the War of Art for the second time now, and there you go. I am feeling that there is that resistance all the time about these goals that I want to attain, and one of those resistances is social media, and that's kept me from having these experiences that Joe's talking about because I didn't plan, or because I thought, hey, I'll get around to it someday, but that someday isn't coming. So, one piece I want to talk about, you mentioned before we hit record, you've got 2 kids. And I know a lot of our people listening, including myself, I've got 3 young kids, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And we have some experiences, and now coming back to social media, what I've seen on social media is this common thread or common theme that is kind of funny, but also kind of sad. It says something to the effect of, hey, we still do the same things that we did before we had kids. It's just all now ruined, or something like that.
I love it, by the way.
Yeah, it's hilarious, but at the same time, there's a little truth and jest there. What do you say to people who are raising a family and they're wanting to get out and do these experiences like you would read about in your book, but they've got their kids in school, or they've got so much money and all these other things? What do you say to them?
I think they need to do it like the house is on fire. I mean, it's so urgent because the time is so short. It is so fleeting. Your kids are going to grow. They're only going to be 3 years old this one summer. They're only going to be 5 years old that one summer. They're going to these are memories that are so critically important. And my experience with it, like most people's, is it's super difficult. It's very hard to make those trips, make those days, make those events happen, but it's so worth it. And even during the actual, thing that you do, whatever it is, like we actually just took a driving trip to Sedona a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
And our kids are 2 and 4, and it's 9 hours to get there, and it's a lot with kids to do that kind of stuff. But literally at about day 3, our 4-year-old looked at us and said, "This is the best trip ever." And we were just like, all right, And it was, we were up all night a couple of the nights because the different things happen as parents. You've got projectile vomiting and cars destroyed, and all kinds of stuff can happen. Yeah. But what I'll say to everyone that is listening that's a parent is, do you want your kids to live the life you tell them to live, or live the way you show them to live? And if you're not going to live that way and do those things, they're not either. So I want my kids to see that I prioritize those things, that I make those things happen at all costs, so that they grow up understanding that even though things are hard, that those are the things you have to do because it's worth it. It's worth doing those things. And I would love to share a little more personal story, if that's okay.
Please.
So to get to the book Experiential Billionaire, Bridget and I, we had a crazy story. We came from both of us very check to check families growing up. I didn't graduate high school. I got kicked out of high school. Bridget actually, she grew up in Flint, Michigan. Both of us started trying to figure things out and work right out of high school. And we got lucky after a number of years and were able to figure out how to start this company. This is a dream company, Listen, to help people get hearing aids, right? So this dream of helping one person get a hearing aid turned into this company that wound up literally partnering with Delta Airlines and Chivas and Spotify and Google. Wow. And we literally wound up selling millions of headphones and giving 50,000 people hearing aids from this one dream of giving one person a hearing aid. Like, we were able to build this movement, create this ripple effect. And that was like a really powerful thing. And the interesting part about it was, we started this company because we saw a video of a girl hearing for the first time. It wasn't because we cared about headphones and speakers. We thought, how do we give someone hearing? And we came up with this idea, why don't we sell headphones and speakers? Because that makes sense. Audio tied to giving people hearing. It's a good message, good story. Cut to 10 years later, after all these missions, COVID happens, and all of our hearing missions get shut down. We can't travel. We can't go give people hearing. And that's what we're passionate about. We're really passionate about the hearing aid part. So we're sat at home and we're trying to figure out what is our value to the world, like, that we can do while we're not out giving these hearing missions. Because we really don't want to just try to compete head to head with Apple selling headphones. That sounds like a bad business plan. So we got some advice to write about our story, because there was a specific moment when we were about 8 years into building Listen, that we realized that we had all these incredible experiences, and at the same time, people kept saying, "You guys must be rich, you must be killing it," because everyone saw Beats sold to Apple for $3 billion. we didn't do that, sadly. But we always would laugh and go, we're more like experiential billionaires because we were giving all our money to charity, but we were getting these experiences that only like the billionaires could get. We were literally traveling around the world and doing things that were just so remarkable, seeing people's lives change. So we write this book. We're like, let's try to capture this philosophy we have about identifying and taking action. And we write it all. We pour our heart and soul into this book, and we get to the end and we turn it in, and it's literally like, if I could sum it up in a sentence, it's that life is short and uncertain. It's important to use your time wisely, to make the most of every moment. We turn in the book. Literally 1 week later, this is only 2 years ago, my wife is out of the blue diagnosed with stage 3 metastatic breast cancer. And we had just had our second son. He was only 3 months old. Our first was 2.5 at the time, or 2 at the time. And our life just completely got flipped upside down. And I'll share everyone the suspense. My wife, went through a year plus of chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation, and a double mastectomy, and she is cancer-free. So we're very fortunate.
Awesome.
A lot of gratitude for our situation. And but as we were going through everything, when we found out actually that she was actually cancer-free after the pathology a year later came back, that the treatments all worked. It was just this really remarkable moment, because we realized that all these feelings that we had throughout this process, because it's obviously just so scary and terrifying for so many reasons and difficult. And my wife's an absolute trooper for getting through all of this. The one feeling we never had was regret, because the 10 years before her diagnosis, we were so diligent about living the way we talk about in the book that I'm talking about now on your show, about figuring out our most important dreams and goals and going after them. So we had filled up the decade before with all kinds of incredible stuff. And again, it was hard. It wasn't like easy to go after all of our goals. Not even close to all of that stuff worked out. Tons of it was absolute disasters. But the effort, it's that taking action, it's the attempt. That's where we get that I tried, that knowledge, that value, right? And that's something that I think people they overlook how much that's going to mean to them, that they actually made that attempt, that they tried. So and when my wife's diagnosis happened, it was her 34th birthday that week. So, again, we thought, like everybody, I'm sure we have a lot more time. We've got plenty of time, et cetera. Things changed really dramatically. We lost a year plus just from all the treatment.
Sure.
But again, and things could have gone the other way, and they do for people, sadly, all the time. And I think that's why it's so important to not assume you have all the time in the world, to not think I can just put things off until someday and then hope for the best. We've got to stop and say, what are the things we really care about? And then put them on our calendars. Well, how can I start taking steps? How can I make those things go from impossible to improbable to inevitable? How do I challenge myself to do those things?
Yeah. Wow. You bring up a lot. I want to go one place first. That we keep talking about time, investing our time in experiences instead of investing our time in things, and how important that is and what that does for us. But it's really interesting when you are traveling into a new place, and I've had this experience. I'm sure you and John have. You talk about it in the book. Is like, how does our experience of time expand due to novel experiences?
Yeah,
I love
great
this concept.
question. Great question. So there's it's called neophilia, that's basically describes like the way that it's basically how we feel about new and novel experiences specifically, but essentially our mind it expands the time that we perceive around that, because it's not new. We all know, the joke I like to tell people is everybody knows that feeling of, you blink and all of a sudden everybody's singing Mariah Carey and it's Christmas again in your office, right? Like it just happens. You're like, where did the year go? But it's because you're doing the same things every day and it all blurs together. Your brain kind of catalogs stuff differently that's monotonous and different. But if it's something new and novel, not only at the time it actually it can be expanded, or sometimes at the time it might seem to go by a little bit quicker because it's so much to process. But afterwards, when you look back at like that 3-day vacation you took spur of the moment, and where you did a bunch of new activities and met a bunch of new people, it seems like you did 4 weeks of stuff in those 3 days, because it was all new and all different fun experiences. So it just really, it's like a cheat. It's like the only way you can actually expand your time. And the other thing I'll say about that is also when we're most vulnerable and most likely to build new relationships with people. So when you do a new experience with someone else, whether it's a stranger or an acquaintance, you're going to develop a much closer bond with that person because you shared that experience. And the studies around how important relationships are, both to people, as we know, personally, when we get older, like one of the number one regrets people also have is not staying in touch with their close friends, not having close friends. But the other studies that show longevity is directly related to how many close personal relationships you have. Like you'll have an extra 5, 6, 7 years of your life if you have close people in your life as you age. And the way to get those close relationships is by doing things. You're not going to get that sitting at home on your couch watching another season of something. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you're almost sitting together in regret together. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, let's watch another episode. This is great. Smoke another bowl. You know what I mean? You're sitting there. You're sitting there with regret. It's just like, because there's something about the human condition. Like we want to do things. Like we're given this life, this body to do shit. I mean, and we're our best when we keep doing different things, and you optimize our time, we optimize our experience, we optimize our worldview, and we change our relationship to ourselves. We change our relationship to other people when we give ourselves new experiences or challenge ourselves in some way, which is a new experience in itself. What do you have to say, for those people? You said, some key words like someday. Right. The someday. I have, some, people live with this, and I have people in my family, and I'm sure we all know people like this. It's like, oh, when I retire, I'll start traveling. When I retire, that's when I'm going to start, doing this new thing. When I retire, my life is just going to suddenly change, and everything is going to be, that whole idea of what retirement is. What do you have to say to those people that have this someday when I retire mentality? My life's going to be awesome.
I got a lot to say.
Yeah, please, because I think people need to hear this. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I've got the data from the study, 20,000 people, and they don't just say when I retire. They say when the kids are older, when the kids are out of school, when I get a promotion. There's always that next thing that they're going to wait for. That'll be then. There'll be time. When I've got some more money, et cetera. Those things are so misleading. First of all, for the reason I said about like my wife's situation. So many people are going to find that they're not in a position for another reason outside their control to do the things that they wanted to do later if they wait too long. And that's something that I think is just a fact, right? There's just too many health concerns, or all kinds of things can happen if we wait too long. The other thing is, I think that people grossly underestimate what they can do in in a certain amount of time, right? So like you said, you've been to like I think 30 countries. I've been to like 40 plus countries or 50 plus countries, and it takes a lot of time to travel. So people that are like, I'm going to travel the world when I retire. It's like, good luck, because it takes a lot of time.
Shit.
I've been doing multiple countries a year for a long time, and I'm barely scratched the surface, right? So you got to really get started on things earlier. And I think the second thing is that gives people a really good excuse for not doing anything, because they take some big thing, right? They take like, I'm going to do this family trip to Italy. These are, by the way, some of the top things that people told us across the 20,000 person study was, people wanted to travel. They wanted to go to Italy. They wanted to learn an instrument. They wanted to do different things like that. They put up the big thing, and then they don't do anything else because they're just waiting for this big thing. But there's so many small things that we can do every single day. There's so many things that give so much joy. Like you can learn how to cook a new cuisine. You can literally get up in the morning and see the sunrise every day. You can go for hikes in nature. You can do things that rewire your brain and change your relationship with time and how you're spending it so quick and so easy. But if you have like this one, like, oh, I'm actually just going to work all the time and sit at my desk every day all day because I'm going to wait until I retire, you're just grossly mistaken on how that's going to work out. And that's really why the studies show at the end of people's lives, nobody is regretting the things they did that went wrong. Even the trip that they took that went wrong, whatever the thing was, it's the stuff they never did. Right. So don't assume you're going to be able to do it. And the last thing I'll throw in there is that maybe, just maybe, when you're retired, first of all, this is America, you might be ritiring at 90 by the time we retire.
Yeah, especially with inflation now, right?
Exactly. But you might not feel like, globetrotting,
Right.
Maybe
that's where I was going to go next.
I'm sure both of you guys, I'm sure you've been to lots of places that we're talking about. It turns out Europe's full of stairs. It's full of,
very true.
Hills, not a lot of elevators, not a lot of stuff was built, thousands of years ago. So there's a lot of places that people don't realize it's not even going to be attainable. And some of the other goals are just things that might change over time. So I think it's just really doing those things, now when you really want to, and putting that someday onto your calendar, like taking it off of this someday calendar that doesn't exist and saying, you know what, I'm gonna put it on my calendar. But I'd like to do it. I'd like to share an exercise if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, this is in the book. This is a cornerstone of like how people, I think, can get started thinking about this stuff. And we do have a card deck as well that has like a shorter version of.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, we have the question later, but there you go. Yeah, I love that. I love that you have this. This is great. What a great package. You get the book, do the cards, you know what I mean, and start experiencing stuff. Like it's like simple recipe.
We'll give you the prompts. The cards give you tons of thought experiments, tons of prompts to get you started, because we don't want to be just talking about how you're not doing it right or whatever. And maybe you are doing it great, but this is just to help you build experiential wealth, how to build your experiences. But the first exercise in the book, it's called Find Your Treasure Map. And basically you just pretend that your doctor called and they've got some bad news. You've only got 1 year left to live. Now, really think about that. Pretend that that's real. That situation is real. You have 1 year left of your life. And now write down the 10 things that you absolutely know that you will regret immensely if you do not do in your last year. Take your time. Take 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes to do this exercise and write those things out. And when you're done, you take a look at that list and then ask yourself how many of those things you're actively planning on doing right now that are already on your calendar, on your to-do list. And what's remarkable is most people in our studies, and we do a lot of workshops and keynotes, the answer is none. They're not actually working on any of the things. So we have this crazy disconnect where there's all these things that we actually know that the most important things for us to do in our lifetime, that we would do them at all costs if there was 1 year left to live, yet we're not planning to do them now. Like, why? How? So the first step of the exercise is to take one of those things on that list, break it down into the very smallest steps possible, and then start taking steps. Whether it's, if it's planning a trip, calling a travel agent, figuring out what it costs,
getting your passport, right? Or something, right?
Anyway, do this stuff. Get rid of the big nebulous idea, break it down into steps that you can actually execute on and start getting momentum and seeing where that can take you, because you'll be surprised at where you can get to. But it's really helpful for people to see, wow, I have all these things that I either never thought of or I suppressed that I really care about that I'm not planning on doing. And I'm going to look up one day and it's going to be too late.
Yeah. I mean, that ties in so beautifully. Sorry, John. That ties in so beautifully to our guest we just had last week, Dr. James Doty, about mind magic and all about visualization and how important it is to manifest through visualization. And I love that card deck because it gives you a recipe, it gives you the roadmap, it gives you the necessary ingredients to plug in a little bit every day. When you start seeing it, right, you're going to start planning it. You're going to start taking your energy and actioning towards it, and starts taking those little steps towards it. I mean, it's just like breaking down any goal. Like, we have goals for the show that we continually access, and it's just like these little incremental, what can we do today, this week, this month, this year, in order to, move the needle a little bit more forward. And you can use that exactly, it sounds like what you're doing, exactly the same thing and I love that term you used, to gain more experiential wealth in your life, because experience is, that is the best use to really give ourselves something meaningful, and a meaningful experience is the best use of our time. And why live with regrets? Like why?
Yeah,
we can,
absolutely. I'll tell you, I'll share something that I share in talks often. But when I was 27 and I thought I was finally, finding my way, again, I had a lot of, I was doing a lot of odd jobs and trying to build things and start things. And everything went sideways, went south suddenly. And I lost everything. And I actually had to file for bankruptcy when I was 27 years old. And I was devastated. I had to go see this bankruptcy attorney, and just the thought that I was going to have to tell everybody that I was bankrupt. And the bankruptcy attorney told me that it cost $5,000 to file bankruptcy. So not only was I completely broke, I actually had to tell people I'd like to be bankrupt. I just can't afford it. But the point of that story is that I was able to build companies after that. I was able to sell some things. I was able to make a lot of money at different points. Absolutely. But my experiences that I had throughout only grew. I never lost any experiences. I had an incredible set of experiences throughout my 20s prior to that happening. And then beyond that, and that's exactly the point I'm trying to share with people, is like your financial, obviously we all need to, again, have that baseline amount of cash to actually pay our bills and survive. But above that, it can go up and down. We really, really, though, need to invest in our experiences to actually feel like our life is like the life that we want to live. There's a lot of different exercises we do around the concept of the end of your life. There's one that's, I'll just share a short version of it, but write out your eulogy now. Like
yes.
You guys heard this, right? Like, see what it sounds like.
I've used it in workshops.
today.
Yeah.
And then if it's not what you want it to be, start making changes so that you can have the one that your dream eulogy should be.
Right.
So those are really interesting ways to think about your life and what it means.
Your treasure map reminded me. So, identifying what you want to do within the next year if you got the bad news, and then identifying what are those that you're actually working towards. It reminds me of how I do my goals. I've got this book right here, and at the very front, I've got someday goals, and that's broken down into personal, professional, physical. One of the physical things is to be able to wipe my own butt when I'm 95. So, and then back, like, hey, that's a big goal. And then backing that up into 10-year goals, 5-year goals, all the way back to like today. What am I doing today to enable those? But I haven't thought about doing it with regards, and I just dropped the notebook that I'm telling you about. I haven't thought about doing it with regards to experiences, and I love that. So I'm going to definitely start doing that. Yeah. And then I want to come back to the piece where you talked about traveling when you're retired. I'm sure you've been to Petra, Joe. Have you been to Petra?
Oh, God.
Funny. I was just in the region in last May, and I had to change. I was booked for Petra, and I didn't go, actually.
Petra is amazing. But just when you get past the treasury, you walk a little bit further, and you can walk up to the monastery. And there's these huge steps. I mean, they've got to be 2 feet high, each one of them. And this is, back when I was in the SEAL teams, and I walked up to the monastery and then walked back down from the monastery past the treasury and then back. All in all, it ends up probably being 4 or 5 miles, but it's pretty intense towards the end. And I can't imagine doing that when I was retired, 60, 70 years old. That would be a bad experience, which brings me to my next question for you. What bad experiences, and you even just talked about bankruptcy, that was a bad experience in and of itself, but you learned something from it. What about when our experiences go sideways and it ends up kind of being a bad experience? Can you learn something from that? And can that be one of your more valuable experiences, even though it didn't go quite like you planned it?
I think that nothing shapes us more than our bad experiences. I think that's how we grow. That's how we become. Nobody goes to the movies to watch a movie about somebody where everything goes great all day, every day.
More boring.
We've ever seen, right? So it's we're all that hero in the hero's journey. That's every one of us, and we're all going to face fires and trials and tribulations. And when we get out the other side, we come out stronger. We come out better. We come out more resilient. We have more gratitude. It's everything that you want comes out of the other side of getting through those things. And that's really why I think the idea of the old wise man on the hill or wise person on the hill, they're wise because they know that whatever's happening, you're going to get through it and you're going to get stronger. Like when you're younger, you're a little bit more like, oh my God, the world's ending. But the more you go through things, the more you realize it's going to be okay and I'm going to be better for it. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to be better. And we talk about that in the book. We have a chapter about that. And I think that reframing negative experiences is an exercise everyone can do. You can just take an experience from your past and say, what are some positive things that came out of this? How did I think of it then? And now how do I think about it now that's different? And most often we find, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, a lot of our worst experiences become just funny stories afterwards.
Yeah.
It might take a year or two. Yeah. But that's that's comedy equals tragedy plus time. So
that's good.
I've never heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah. During the trials of my bankruptcy, my cousin, who's extremely funny, I was absolutely borderline. It was a mental health crisis for me. I was absolutely devastated. And the day that this was kind of happening, I wound up my car had been totaled. It was a whole mess. And my cousin just looked at me and goes, I'm sure we'll be laughing about this tomorrow. And I just laughed so hard because it was obviously going to be a lot longer than tomorrow.
Right.
But, it's like sometimes you just have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off and say, this is going to teach me something and I'm going to be better for it. And I'll actually share one last thing about in the study, a full third of the answers of the top most valuable experience that someone listed were negative experiences.
Oh,
so,
wow. There you go.
Tons and tons of people listed that as like the most valuable experience in their life was something negative.
Yeah, I would say probably the same in my life. Don't get me wrong. I love the experience of having kids and being a father. And that is absolutely probably the number one. But some of the second and third and fourth ones are negative experiences that I've grown through. So sorry, Will, I stepped on you again.
No, all good, all good. I mean, you mentioned tragedy when we were talking about good and bad experiences. I thought of a quote by Shakespeare. He goes, there is no good or bad. Thinking makes it so. And it's really what it is, like how we process that experience completely. So I think we've mentioned the R word a bunch here, right? Regret. We also talked about mindset and stuff like that. So how does regret influence our mental health?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously that the idea of what if, right? Like, so the idea of a regret for something you never did or never tried, I think is just extremely debilitating. It's something that I think takes a lot out of people's desire to. I guess the way that you look at your value and your, what your life means or meant. So I think it's a really powerful feeling. I think that that's why I think when people talk about regretting things that they did, I honestly think a lot of the time they don't mean regret. They mean that, they're unhappy with the outcome, but they probably don't regret trying the thing as much as that thing would be if they didn't do it. But yeah, I think that it's just a really powerful, not having regret is a really powerful way to feel very confident about the value and the purpose in your life. So I guess how I would look at it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope that answered it. I know that wasn't.
It does. No, absolutely. And I can't help but I forget what movie it is. It's kind of a ridiculous movie, but there's a father and there's a young kid who's got this tattoo that says no regrets.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
That's really
he
funny.
says, "Are you sure? Not even one letter?"
It was Jason. I can't remember the movie. Jason Bateman's in it, and he's the dad.
Yeah, Jason Bateman is in it, and the guy. Movie. Yeah, it's hilarious. I'm gonna have to look that up and put it in the show notes, but it's freaking hysterical, especially that part cracks me up. But we also talked about right before we hit record mindfulness. I mean, the show is Men Talking Mindfulness, and here we have 3 people speaking about experiences, but that is in and of itself, that's mindfulness. But for you, how does mindfulness play into experiences, and does it enhance your mindfulness practice or your experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that excuse me. I think that so many of the little things that add up to so much value are just really, really about being present. And I think that, whether it's something like enjoying the experience of, for instance, maybe you have coffee every morning instead of having a coffee and, doing 7 things and multitasking, just actually stopping and being present and enjoying a cup of coffee or watching the sunrise, doing those types of things where you're just aware of how fortunate we are to be alive and, healthy in this world. And for me, a lot of this was born out of when my father had this sudden health episode when I was 18, where we thought he was actually, we thought he had a heart attack, but it turned out he had heart failure because he wound up on life support for 2 months and wound up with a heart transplant. Excuse me. Sorry, let me get some water really quick.
Go for it, man.
All good.
Go for it.
All good.
So yeah,
you're a pro. You got your water right there.
Yeah.
You've got to be ready.
Yeah.
So he, what happened was, while he was in the hospital at the time, I had gone through this ridiculously terrible adolescence full of addiction and all kinds of stuff. Again, it was this rough time in my life. And that was my first moment where it woke me up, where I thought, hey, wait a minute, we don't have a guarantee on how much time we have to, fulfill our goals and dreams and those things. And then my dad was lucky. He got his transplant a couple months later, and he had to change his whole life around. And he wound up, moving and having this incredible second life in Mexico. Lived on some beach. Again, he was very, very poor, living on Social Security and post his transplant. But he had this incredible high quality of life, and that lasted a little over a decade. And then he wound up getting cancer and getting sick, and I took him home for hospice care and went through the process. And the reason that I want to bring that up again is, as I was going through that, the practice of gratitude and mindfulness saved me personally from an absolute catastrophic mental health spiral. And then after after he actually passed, I had anxiety that started to well up because my father had this episode at 48 years old where his heart failed. And I thought, is this going to happen to me? Am I going to suddenly have this episode? And literally not even a month or two after my dad passed away, I wound up getting divorced from my first wife. And all of these things were kind of collapsing around me. And I just really leaned into the practice of gratitude, of just, taking things day by day, looking for the positives. I literally changed my email sign off to Director of Positivity, and it's been that ever since. And yeah, I literally just try to reframe everything I see in a different light. And I think, what could this look like if I look at it from a different angle? What's the positives in it? And I think that if you go into experiences with that in mind, you can take any experience, no matter how negative it is, and make it a lot better, because we're going to go through difficult experiences. So there's a really long answer to your question, which is, if you're, you could be at the airport, for instance, and they cancel your flight, and you've got, this has happened to me multiple times. I've got my kids, and, it's challenging, right? But so does it help for me to get angry? Does it help for me to get frustrated? Does it help for my family, for anyone around me? No. Right. So just by stopping, taking those breaths, centering, grounding, thinking about the positive that we can take out of the situation, we can get through so much more, and we can affect so many more people around us in a positive way that it's just really powerful. And I think it's contagious as well. Like we talked about, like doing things like anything in the giving kind of realm. I think the more you display that type of ability, it's inspiring to other people to think, because you're not, quote unquote, teaching people. But if I saw, you guys actually doing this and I was frustrated, I'd be like, I want to be like those guys. I want to be the calm guy that's present, that's taking a deep breath, that's, practicing mindfulness, that's not doesn't have veins bulging out of his neck, like the gate attendant, So I think it's really important, and to pull in all of our perspective to, those moments really helps.
Yeah, well, just a couple more questions, and kind of sticking in that mindfulness vein. What are some recommendations that you have in order to get the most out of these experiences that we're trying to do for ourselves when we take that trip, or whatever experience we're having that we've kind of like built into our life deliberately? What can we do? I mean, journaling or photos, or what are some things that you've learned along the way that really help you to capture more of that experience, not just the memory of it, but maybe more of that, the uplifting of the soul that comes from giving yourself worthy experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first of all, I'm like you guys. I've been very anti social media, but I think that social media has a really powerful value in documenting a lot of the things that you do if you use it for that. So you have a record to look back on. There's a lot of science around the emotional value that you get from reliving experiences, memories, trips, etc., by looking at the videos or pictures. So it's really important to try to at least capture some of that stuff. And of course, doing different things, like we talked about the neophilia. Like, even if you really want to go to the same place every year on holiday, do different stuff while you're there. And I strongly recommend trying to do different things, because the older we get, especially, we start to fear anything different because it seems harder or scary. But do the different stuff, find the different activities, look for stuff that's fun that you may have forgotten. We have a whole chapter in the book about play. There's so many things that we did as kids that we stopped doing for no reason, that we never actually even realized. Like, the way I like to say it is, you didn't realize it was your last sleepover, or your last, pillow fight, or your last time you played in the sprinklers, or whatever that thing was. But those things are so free, so easy, so fun to do. You can do that kind of stuff. Make lists, like actually proactively go through, your available activities wherever you're going to go, or even if you're not going somewhere, like what things you could do, and put them in the calendar. Like, again, make lists of those things, so that when you do those things, you can get the most out of them and document them. And again, there's so many little things in the book's full of actionables. And I guess I like, the reason I'm telling you this, not just, it's not just like general information, is if I can do this, anyone can do this. Again, if I can live a life like this, everyone can do it. Everyone can absolutely do this.
Yeah. That piece with the last pillow fight or the last sleepover. Yeah. Those are experiences that we have. But then again, as a parent, and I'm sure you've seen, again, this stuff on social media, is at some point your little boy, your little girl is going to come up to you and say, "Daddy, play with me," and that's going to be the last time they ask for that. Or you're going to be putting them in the bathtub, and they're going to have the little bubble beard and bubble mustache, and that'll be the last time they ever do that. And holding your hand, that'll be the last time they ever do that. And man, that breaks my heart to read that kind of stuff, because I know at some point it's going to be the last of everything. But understanding that helps you to appreciate those times that you are doing it, that you are getting asked by your kid to play with you, that you are getting asked by your kid to hold your hand or hold their hand. So I just wanted to echo that, but from a different perspective, from the parent's side, not just the actual individual experiencing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it all the time. If I'm tired and my kids are being a little clingy and needy while I'm trying to do something, and it's like, about bedtime, and I'm just trying to get their dinner ready or something going on, and I'll have to stop and do just what you just said. I'll stop and think, you know what? They're not going to always want to hang on my arm. They're not going to want me to pick them up and give them a hug. And again, for me personally, I just think 2 years ago, my wife was getting diagnosed with cancer, and here I am getting to spend this time with my wife and my 2 kids. Like, these are moments that are so incredibly valuable. I can't be annoyed with them. I have to be grateful and happy about them. And we're all human. We're going to have moments where things, overflow, and we're like, I might react. But it's knowing that, okay, we just have to keep reminding ourselves, just like mindfulness in general. That's like, there's not a perfect. It's just constantly trying to be a better. So
right. And that coming back to the bad experiences ending up being some of your best. there's fingerprints of the kids all over the windows, and there's toys all over the house. At some point, those frustrations that I have now as an adult, I'm going to wish that I had those back. So, hey, Joe, what is, one thing or anything really, maybe multiple things that we haven't discussed yet?
Oh man, well, there's lots of tools I think that are available that I haven't mentioned that. If you want some specific stuff, we have a bunch of the tools on our Experiential Billionaire website. It's all free, by the way. So if anybody doesn't want to actually read the whole book, you can actually use the exercises and go through a whole bunch of the exercises to help you get on your way and get started. Again, and the card deck is like a quick and easy way for people to find and rediscover their dreams. Yeah, I think that, to me, I think the thing that we probably haven't leaned enough into or talked as much about is how this all relates to relationships and how important relationships are. Because I really firmly believe that, no matter who you are, you didn't get to where you got or where you're going. You're never going to get there without so many people helping and supporting and believing in you. And I really think that, that's just such a key component. And when we speak about this stuff, especially, to communities or corporations, divisions, teams, all that, we can't emphasize enough how critical it is to build those types of strong relationships and that type of trust and belonging through shared experiences. Because it's just, you could sit next to somebody in a cubicle for 5 years, not know really anything about them. But if you go on like a 2-day camping trip with them, with a tent next to a river, you're going to be really close by the end of that trip. You're going to have a whole different idea and understanding, and it's going to help you, really identify with people a lot better.
Love that.
Yeah. Wow. This has been great, Joe. Really, one last thing. If somebody's just listening, they're like, oh, this is all for those other people. I have financial problems and I have difficulty paying my bills. It's like, what do you have to say from this experiential, providing yourself experiences for somebody that might not have the means right now, but maybe later on to, afford a bigger trip like we've talked about. So what do you have to say to them? Somebody that has or maybe they're trying, maybe families are trying to put their kids through college and, really have a tight budget in order to to make that possible for them. What do you have to say for that?
Yeah. I think, those are extremely common reasons. The number one reasons were, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, or I'm afraid, or I just haven't got around to planning. That's really that's it. Yeah. That's all of everyone's reasons. You have to start where you can. So it might take the same person, it might take 2 years to plan a family trip to Italy, and another person might be able to plan it in a month, just depending on their resources. But start where you are, start where you can, and take steps. If you don't start, you're not going to get it done. And that's the hardest part. It's always starting to take steps. So, the compound interest of your actions is just so huge. And to me, if I could just say one thing to everybody, after we just spoke about how incredibly dangerous regret is, it's that action is the anti-regret. Taking steps is the anti-regret. So if you can just start, if you can say, okay, identify what the thing is, I want to do this thing, that's a step. And then say, okay, now I'm going to figure out how, maybe it takes me, they say, I read somewhere, I'm not sure if this is true, but I read that the average American family saves for 5+ years for a family trip to Disney World because of the cost of that type of vacation. So, again, sometimes you got to plan way ahead, but just remember, how many summer vacations do you have? You want to do that family road trip, you want to do that, bonding, camping, whatever that thing is, you don't have forever.
Right. And like you talked about at the beginning, it doesn't have to be that family vacation to Disney. Maybe that's the long-term goal, but maybe it is going and camping next to a river as a family.
Right.
That's an experience. Or maybe it is, like you talked about, getting up in the morning, getting your cup of coffee and going sit and watching the sunrise. Those are also experiences that we neglect because maybe they're so small. We're like, hey, that's not an experience. I don't have time for that even. But if you do, and that's mindfulness, if you do stop and you experience those tiny moments, that can also feed that gratitude, which is also, I feel, the anti-regret. So
Yeah.
I love it. I love it, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my parents, my parents bought an old truck because we were pretty, financially challenged family. We were poor, to put it bluntly, and they bought an old truck and got one of those sit-on-top campers that sat on the bed of the truck.
Yeah.
And every summer we would drive back to Chicago to visit our family and stop in national parks and camp. And I didn't know that we were poor. I had no idea. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. We were in a camper and we got to camp in all these really cool places. Like kids and bonding, it doesn't require a big budget. Like those aren't requirements. Those aren't the things. Those memories to me are absolutely. It's like I went to Yacht Week as a 5-year-old. To me that memory is like the coolest thing in the whole world. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did. It's funny you mentioned saving for Disney World. We did a lot of camping when I was a kid. My father was a teacher. So we had our summers off and we did a lot of camping. We had a pop-up camper. We had tents when I was much younger. But then we took this big trip to Disney World when I was 15. Yeah, my old brother was 16 and my little brother was like 12. And they stayed for a couple years, and like we stayed inside Disney World. This is like back in 87 or something like that. 88. I know I'm dating myself tremendously. I know, a long fucking time ago, right? 35 years ago, 36 years ago.
You went 3 years ago.
it was when Disney World was still flat.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, this is what I mean, it's like. But I remember going to all those campgrounds, and like all you needed is my bike. If there's a body of water somewhere or a boat, a swimming place, like sand, like I had a fucking blast.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do in those places. You know what I mean? I just love I live in New York City, the concrete jungle, and I love just getting out and seeing anything different than another building, another person, another Mexican food truck or something like that. It's
man, I do love those Mexican food trucks in New York.
I know, but when you see them every day, John.
that give you an idea again. Like you live in a city, like you can find a coworker and say, "Hey, let's try a different Mexican food truck every day for a week." Let's
There you go. Little experiences, right?
Yeah.
Little experiences.
Let's get a group together and who else wants to find the best burger in all of whatever borough,
Yeah.
Like,
maybe you have a companion book of micro experiences. You know what I mean? Literally. Lead to bigger experiences, because it's really what it does. Right, it's those little baby steps, that like it keeps the lights on, it keeps the energy flowing, it keeps the mind open. Like we just talked about, expanding time based on experiences. But you can give yourself these little opportunities, like no matter where you are, no matter what you do, where you live, in order to kind of upgrade into a better a life that is more rewarding, instead of being like living in would-haves and should-haves and could-haves, right? Those regrets, which are just so incredibly, demoralizing to ourselves, and then they affect our relationships. They affect, our work. So just even getting out a little bit every day, or a few times a month, or once a week, can just be so soul satisfying. I feel in so many ways. I really appreciate you having your show. Yeah.
Yeah. And those things tie even to. I'll just say that the money part of it all. Actually, it's all tied together. The more relationships you have, the more strong relationships you have, the more likely you're going to have success and financial success as well. So people should actually prioritize it, even if they're thinking only about how it could benefit them in the future financially. It's still the best decision. Everybody wants to hang out with the guy that has a bunch of cool experiences, and it just adds value to you as a person.
Yeah. It gives you some depth. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. Character, right? Add character, Awesome, Joe. We mentioned the book, so pick it up. Experiential Billionaire, build a life rich in experiences and die with no regrets. And also, I love these cards, right? The cards are called Treasure Maps, card deck, exercises to find and discover your dreams. They're both on Amazon. There he goes, little book. Oh, there you go. You're ready to go, Joe. I appreciate that. You know what? I thought it'd be nice to close with, almost the end of the intro in your book. It says, if you keep turning the pages of this book, they will show you how to reorient your life towards meaningful experiences so you can make the most of your time on this planet. It's not a bumper sticker telling you to follow your dreams. It's a manual for building a life rich in experiences, backed by science, and filled with actionable takeaways. Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
It has been. So And Joe, we wrap the show up with a closing practice, very much like we did at the beginning, just to ground us, because now listening to all your experiences, sharing our experiences, that's got us all amped up. And so now we're going to calm ourselves down, calm our audience down, and then we'll say farewell. So let's again bring ourselves into this moment. Notice where you are sitting, how you're being supported, whether that's through the ground, through a chair you're sitting on, maybe you're even lying down, or maybe you're driving. Notice that support. And now start to bring your attention to your breath. Just noticing the rise and fall of your chest and belly as you inhale and as you exhale. And let's try to tie into this show today about these experiences. This here, now, this in and of itself is an experience. This moment right here, wherever you are, whatever it is you're doing. Let's tie into this present moment, this experience. Notice the sounds you're hearing, the physical sensations you're feeling, the smells you're smelling or not smelling, the lack of a smell, the tastes, what you're seeing. If your eyes are open or closed, we're still seeing something. And then the emotions you're experiencing, the emotions you're feeling in the here and now, right here, right now. We'll wrap it up with 2 deep cleansing breaths together. Begin by exhaling, emptying your lungs, emptying. Deep breath in, into your belly, then into your chest, holding at the top, and releasing nice and slow, and holding empty again at the bottom. Deep breath in, hold at the top, and breathe out this experience, and think about the experiences that you're going to have today and tomorrow and down the road, next week, next month. Here we are. All right. If your eyes were closed, go ahead and open them back up. And again, Joe, thanks so much for being here with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. It has been an experience, and we feel that we are that much richer for having you here today. We appreciate you. And for our audience, thanks for tuning in. You know where to find us. Until next time, take care.
Peace. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.